You know that sound of a shovel hitting dead earth? It is a sharp, hollow clink, the sound of metal striking a biological vacuum. I've stood in my own backyard on a Saturday morning, coffee cooling in my hand, staring at a raised bed that felt less like a garden and more like a forensic crime scene. I dug my fingers into the soil, and it resisted. It cracked. It felt like something between sun-baked chalk and industrial concrete. Beside my boot, a tomato plant I had nursed from a tiny, hopeful seed sat paralyzed, its leaves yellowing into a sickly, translucent curl. Barely 6 inches tall after 60 days in the ground. I had done everything the labels told me to do. I had watered on a schedule and spent $40 on a bag of premium organic fertilizer that promised explosive growth. And yet, the ground remained silent, staring back at me. With the same slow failure I'd watched unfold last season and the season before that. Now, I want you to zoom out with me for a second. Think about the last time you stood in the produce aisle, looking at the price tags in the grocery store. $4 for a single bell pepper, $6 for a pint of cherry tomatoes grown in a greenhouse. 1,000 miles away, shipped in a refrigerated truck, just to arrive looking red enough to pass. You feel that quiet squeeze of frustration in your chest, because you know instinctively that a pepper shouldn't cost that much. It shouldn't cost what a gallon of gas used to cost, what nobody tells you at the garden center. And what no fertilizer company will ever print on their packaging is that the problem is not your effort. It is not your watering schedule, or your seed variety, or the amount of sunlight hitting your patio. The problem is that the ground beneath your plants has been slowly hollowed out, stripped of the invisible living architecture that once made food grow without buying a product to make it happen. Your soil is not underperforming, it is in a state of advanced biological exhaustion. Go outside right now and perform a simple audit. Grab a handful of your garden soil and squeeze it. Does it clump into a hard, dense ball that refuses to break apart, like a piece of unfired clay? Or does it fall through your fingers like sterile powder, completely devoid of any visible structure? Either way, you are holding a receipt. That handful of dirt is telling you a story of a system that has been stripped of its glues and its engineers. Healthy ground should have a specific smell. Dark, sweet, and complex, like a forest floor after a summer rain. It should crumble gently, held together by biological proteins. Proteins you can't see, but you can certainly feel. Think about what you spent last year, the bags of potting mix, the bottles of liquid feed, the pest sprays you grabbed because something was chewing holes in your basil. Add it up honestly, $60, $120, you were never meant to win inside that loop. The deck was stacked long before you picked up a trowel. Because the gardening industry has successfully rebranded a biological process, they rebranded it as a chemical one. Here is the thing, nobody told you about that first bag of synthetic fertilizer. You were not feeding your soil, you were signing it up for a life support system. Every season you pour those granules in, the bill gets bigger, while the ground underneath gets quieter. This was a transition that happened after World War II, when the chemical plants that manufactured high-intensity explosives suddenly had no war to supply. They found a new customer right in the American backyard. Nitrogen-based fertilizer gave them a way to monetize their surplus. Almost overnight, the conversation about food shifted from biology to chemistry, from living systems you cultivate to synthetic inputs you subscribe to. The industry didn't need you to understand soil, it just needed you to buy the bag. The cleverness of this industry is that they sell you the poison and the cure in the exact same aisle. Synthetic fertilizer delivers a high-dose hit of nitrogen that makes your plants green up almost overnight. It looks like success, but it is an optical illusion. What you cannot see is that the same salt-heavy dose is scorching the fungal threads of the mycorrhizal network. This ancient web connects roots to minerals they could never reach alone, and it shrivels on contact. One application, and the fungal threads retreat. 2 applications, and they stop coming back. By the 3rd season, your soil has forgotten how to feed itself. You have effectively evicted the workforce and replaced them with a subscription service you never agreed to. And it doesn't stop at chemistry. Think about what happens every time you drive a tiller through your beds. You feel productive, the soil looks fluffy and clean, but you have just performed a biological massacre. A tiller is a meat grinder for the soil food web. It shreds every worm tunnel, slices through fungal networks that took months to establish, and flips anaerobic layers to the surface. Where they oxidize and lose their carbon in a matter of days, you took a living architecture and turned it into loose rubble. The worms that were building structure and pulling organic matter deep into the profile are gone, crushed, exposed, or dried out. Without those biological tunnels, the soil compacts harder than before within weeks. So you till again, and each pass leaves the ground more dependent on you, and less capable of doing anything on its own. Consider the premium potting mix in those colorful bags. Crack one open and squeeze it. It holds together like an engineered sponge, uniform, sterile, and entirely predictable. There is no grit of mineral soil, no threads of mycelium, and absolutely no earthy scent of active biology. It is mostly peat moss stripped from wetlands that took centuries to form, mixed with perlite and a starter dose of slow-release chemical pellets. It will prop up a transplant for a few weeks, but it will never build a food web. It simply cannot. There is nothing alive in it to build with. You paid $12 for a bag of dead medium, designed to look exactly like Earth. When a gardener panics because there are no worms in their bed, I want to redirect that fear. The absence of worms is not a mystery, it is a clinical symptom. It is the accumulated cost of every bag of fertilizer that sterilized the microbial layer, every pass of the tiller that destroyed the tunnels, and every herbicide application that shut down decomposition before it could even start. The worms didn't abandon you. You were sold a system that made your soil uninhabitable for them. And then you were sold another product to replace what they used to do for free. But beneath every dead garden bed, there is an operating system that has been running for 400 million years. It doesn't need a factory, and it doesn't need a patent. It has been running since before anything with a spine walked on land. And the only reason it stopped working in your backyard is that we paved over its instructions and called that progress. You can reset this system tonight, and it costs almost nothing. I want you to picture a simple, fermented brew. Nothing exotic, just lukewarm water, a spoonful of blackstrap molasses, a pinch of dry yeast, and a handful of raw sugar. The molasses isn't just for sweetness. It carries iron, potassium, sulfur, and trace minerals that act like a welcome mat for microbial enzymes. The yeast provides a pulse of fermentation activity, and the sugar gives a rapid burst of energy. Together, they do not feed your plants. They send a biological signal downward into the dark, into the quiet layers where the real workforce has been waiting. You let that bucket sit for an hour or two, until a thin foam rises on the surface, catching that deep, earthy smell of biology waking up. You pour it not onto the leaves, but directly into the soil, right around the roots in the cool of early evening. Now, here is the part that rewires how you think about dirt. Stand outside after dark with a flashlight, crouch low and hold the beam across the surface of the bed. What you will see will unsettle you in the best possible way. Faint ripples, tiny shifts in the soil crust, movement where there was none. That is the soil food web responding to a chemical sentence. A sentence you wrote in molasses and sugar. Earthworms are arriving, not because you bought them at a bait shop, but because you issued a biological broadcast, and they followed the trail home. By morning, the evidence is undeniable. Small tunnels opening where the ground was sealed tight yesterday. Castings worth $30 a bag at retail, appearing right on the surface for free. In healthy soil, a single teaspoon contains more microorganisms than there are people on this planet. Bacteria are breaking down the sugars. Fungi are extending filaments called hyphae, forming a living mesh that trades nutrients between plants like a nervous system trades signals. Protozoa are grazing on the bacteria and releasing nitrogen in a plant-available form right at the root surface. And the earthworms, the quiet engineers of the underground, are pulling organic matter downward, mixing it through the layers and opening channels for the very air and water your plants are starving for. This is not a poetic metaphor. This is infrastructure. It is a logistics network, a nutrient cycling engine, and a carbon storage vault, all running on decomposition and cooperation. No factory made it, and no corporation can invoice you for it. But attraction is only half the equation. You can lure every earthworm in the neighborhood tonight, and they will leave by Tuesday if the conditions above ground betray them. Bare soil under direct sun is a biological emergency. It heats up fast, moisture vanishes, and the surface becomes hostile. If there are chemical residues from last season's pesticide habit, the exodus will be even faster. The answer is the roof over the factory floor. Mulch: cover the ground with dry leaves raked from the curb, straw from a feed store, or wood chips a tree service would have dumped. When you lay down a thick 6-inch layer of organic matter, you are creating a stable microclimate. You are flattening the temperature swings and creating a cool, damp corridor where biology can work 24 hours a day. That layer of mulch is not decoration. It is the only thing keeping your workforce from clocking out and never coming back. The people getting the most out of their soil are not the ones doing the most. They are the ones who figured out where to place one small input and then got out of the way. A handful of kitchen scraps in the right spot does what an entire shelf of bottled nutrients cannot, because it feeds the network that feeds the plant. But you have to be vigilant about who shows up. There is an invader you need to know: the jumping worm. If you pick up a normal earthworm, it moves slowly and deliberately. If you pick up a jumping worm, it thrashes like a small snake, whipping and flipping with a frantic, wrong energy. Look at the band around its body, the clitellum. On a beneficial worm, it is raised and pinkish. On a jumping worm, it is flush with the skin, smooth as plastic, and a pale, milky white. These are not builders, they are strippers. They devour the leaf litter layer so fast that the ground turns into loose coffee grounds that can't hold water. If you see them, contain them, do not move that soil. The goal is to protect the composters and the tunnel builders who turn death into fertility for nothing. Finally, I want you to imagine a moment that feels increasingly likely. The grocery store shelves are half empty. The lettuce that used to be $2 is now $7. You can feel the tension in the air, the supply chain buckling under its own weight. Somewhere in that crowd, someone is realizing they can't afford their weekly bill. Now, picture yourself walking out your back door instead, to a patch of ground you've been quietly feeding for months. The kale is thick, the soil smells like a forest, and you pull food from earth so soft, your fingers sink in without effort. There are no barcodes here, no shareholders, no freight trucks delayed at a border, just you, the dirt under your nails. And a biological engine that answers to no one's pricing algorithm. The earth has not forgotten how to feed you. The question is whether you are willing to remember how to work with it. We've been encouraged to ignore this intelligence because a closed loop does not sell products. But the moment you learn to build fertility from decay and moisture, you become invisible to the machine. You step outside the transaction entirely. So tell me honestly, what is the one thing growing in your yard right now that you could not buy at any price during the last shortage? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you're protecting.